What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 predictions for the upcoming 2024 college football season. The North Carolina Tar Heels are up next. North Carolina coming off an 8-5 season last year in 2023. So kind of a disappointing year for North Carolina. You know, a lot of people were picking the Tar Heels to win the ACC and picking this team as a top contender in the conference as well, but they did not live up to those expectations. My thoughts on this team, though, for 2024, I think they're going to be pretty solid. Not like a great team or anything like that, but I think they're going to be pretty solid. You look at the offensive side of the football, Drake May, of course, gone to the NFL and everything, one of the best quarterbacks in the last couple years in North Carolina history. So with him gone now, they got options at quarterback. They got Connor Harrell, who played in the bowl game last year. In my opinion, I think he'll be the starting quarterback, but you got Max Johnson, the transfer quarterback, coming over from Texas A&M. He has a lot of experience, so I think he'll probably be solid for them as well. And then defensively, a lot of question marks for North Carolina, a lot of losses from last year. So let's go ahead and get to the schedule here for 2024. This is the schedule here for North Carolina. Again, they were 8-5 last year in 2023. So let's go game by game now and give you a record prediction here for North Carolina for 2024. They start things off on a Thursday night on August 29th. They'll play on the road here at Minnesota on August 29th in week number 1 on a Thursday night. So this is a rematch from last year. You know, the Tar Heels beat Minnesota last year. The defense of North Carolina really shut down the offense of Minnesota. I think Minnesota is definitely going to be a lot better this year, and the fact that this game is on the road, it's a very tough place to play. Minnesota, I think, is going to be a really decent team this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Golden Gophers. This game is on a Thursday night, so I think it will be a very competitive game like it was last year, but I think Minnesota will be fired up in this one. They're definitely going to look for revenge here on this North Carolina team, so I think Minnesota does that. It's probably a low-scoring type game. It's definitely going to be like a defensive battle, but I think Minnesota, they're definitely clearly the more experienced team and definitely not the more talented team. I think, I don't think either of these teams are the more talented team. I think it's a pretty even matchup. I'm going to go with the Golden Gophers here to get revenge on North Carolina from last year's game. So I got North Carolina starting out 0-1, but then they take care of business in their next 3 games from September the 7th all the way to September 21st against Charlotte, NC Central, and James Madison. I know that James Madison game could be a little bit tough, but they lost their head coach and everything, so that's the reason why I'm not really that high on that James Madison team this year. So that puts North Carolina's record now at 3-1, and then they open up ACC play here on the road at Duke on September 28th. Obviously a rivalry game. Anything can go here in this one. Duke obviously going to lose their head coach from last year, so the Blue Devils won't be the same team, but just like I mentioned with North Carolina, I think this is going to be a really young team this year. They lost a good amount of talented players from last year, so maybe this is a pretty even matchup. The quarterback experience definitely probably goes to North Carolina. Duke is going to have a really young quarterback as well, so I think both of these teams are probably going to really struggle to score here in this one. I think North Carolina might be the more talented team here, but just because it's a rivalry game and everything, I've kind of been back and forth on this game. So I think the Blue Devils playing at home, that does, favor the difference here in this one. Again, it's a really back and forth game, and I think every game in the ACC is going to be really tough to predict, but I'm going to go with the Blue Devils here to pull off a upset here in this one. I know it sounds crazy, again, the Blue Devils are going to lose their head coach this year, but again, when it comes to a rivalry game, it's really hard to predict when some of these teams are pretty even, and I think both of these teams are pretty even as well. So I got North Carolina losing their second game here of the season on the road here at Duke on September 28th, and that puts their record now at 3-2. And then after that, they'll play at home against Pittsburgh here on October the 5th. Again, the Pittsburgh Panthers weren't really that great last year. I mentioned this in the West Virginia video from yesterday. I think the Panthers are going to be a little bit better this year. Maybe they're not up there with the top teams in the ACC anymore or anything like that, but North Carolina is playing at home in this one. I do expect them to be fired up after that loss to Duke from last week. So with that being said, I think North Carolina does get a bounce-back win here over Pittsburgh. This is probably going to be a close game, though. I think it's going to be a close game. I think North Carolina does pull it out, and that puts their record here at 4-2. Next game is at home against Georgia Tech on October 12th. This will be a home home game here for the Tar Heels. A revenge game here for the Tar Heels from last year's game. Georgia Tech, I think, is going to be really good this year. You do have some concerns about Georgia Tech's defense, but their offense should be really good as well. So this game might turn into a shootout. It's a home game here for the Tar Heels, but, Georgia Tech beat North Carolina, at home a couple years ago against the Tar Heels and everything. Could they do that, and beat North Carolina now for like the third consecutive year in a row? I don't really think so. I think the Tar Heels come out really fired up for this one. I think they're definitely going to get revenge here on Georgia Tech from last year. I know Georgia Tech is a program that seems like it's heading in the right direction, but I'm going to go with North Carolina here just because they're playing at home. And again, they get revenge here on Georgia Tech from last year's game, so that puts the Tar Heels record now at 5-2. They get a bye week here before playing on the road here at Virginia on October 26th. I think Virginia is going to be a little bit better this year. A lot of experience coming back, especially on the offensive side of the football. And I think it's another one of those revenge games for North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. I think Virginia beat the Tar Heels last year, if I'm not mistaken either. So this probably could be another revenge game here for the Tar Heels. Virginia, again, I think is going to be really competitive this year with all the experience that they have returning and everything. But it won't be enough, though. I think North Carolina definitely is the more talented team. And also, the Tar Heels do get a bye week before playing this game. And I also think North Carolina is going to be fired up trying to get revenge here on Virginia from last year as well. So like back-to-back revenge games here for the Tar Heels. Not in back-to-back weeks, but a bye week in between those two back-to-back revenge games and everything. So I think North Carolina goes on the road here and beats Virginia. It's a close game. I'm going to go with the Tar Heels here to pull off the win. And I got North Carolina now improving to 6-2. And then they play on the road here at Florida State on November 2nd. So they got back-to-back road games here with Virginia and Florida State. Florida State, not going to be the same team as they were from last year, but they did bring in, of course, some transfers to help them out. This is a very tough place to play at Tallahassee, Florida and everything. And I think Florida State is definitely the more talented team. I've already done my Florida State video from a long time ago, and I did choose the Seminoles to win this one. So I'm going to go with the Florida State Seminoles. This could be a pretty big game. Both of these teams probably ranked in the top 25 by this point as well. So I think North Carolina does lose that game, and that gives them their third loss here of the season. So that puts their record now here at 6-3, and then they get their second bye week here before playing Wake Forest at home on November 16th. Not really that high on the Demon Deacons this year. This is really one of the most consistent teams in the ACC and everything, but I'm just not really that high on Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest is not going to be really good this year, so I think North Carolina wins this game fairly easily. And then after that, they'll play Boston College here on the road on November 23rd. Definitely a trap game here in the month of November against a Boston College team. I know they lost their head coach from last year, but they do have a good amount of production coming back on the offensive side of the football. The defense may not be really good for Boston College, but this is on the road. Boston College can definitely give North Carolina a scare in this one, and I think that's what they're going to do. I think they pull off the upset here in this one. I'm actually going to go with the upset here on the road at Boston College, and especially when it's in the month of November, I think Boston College will be better by this time as a team. And again, North Carolina is going to be a really young team this year, so I think Boston College definitely wins this one. I don't really feel confident with this upset pick, but I'm going to go with Boston College anyway, just because it's on the road and it's definitely a trap game here in the month of November. So I got North Carolina losing their fourth game here of the season, and then the final game is at home against NC State here on November 30th. Obviously, the Wolfpack have defeated North Carolina now for the last couple years. NC State beat North Carolina a couple years ago at North Carolina and everything. So this is like a double revenge game here for the Tar Heels for the last couple meetings. NC State's going to be also pretty young this year, so this might be like a battle between two young teams. It's obviously a rivalry game. Anything can happen here in the battle of, North Carolina and everything. I think both of these teams are pretty even, and obviously when it comes to like a rivalry game, like I mentioned in the Duke game there on September 28th, it's obviously hard to predict these rivalry games when they're really that close. So with that being said, this is a 50-50 game here, and it's also a coin flip type game for me as well. And also, I think North Carolina is going to be really fired up for this one because I think after that loss to Boston College, they definitely looked ahead to NC State the next week. So I think North Carolina does get revenge here on NC State after the two losses in a row in the last couple years now. So I think the Tar Heels do win their final game here of the season at home against NC State in rivalry weekend on November 30th. So I got North Carolina finishing with a record of 8-4 here for 2024. Like I said, this might be a really young team this year. They lose Drake May at quarterback, but they also got plenty of options at quarterback, some transfers to help them out. So this might be a really good North Carolina team. Don't get me wrong, I think they're still going to be a really consistent team. But again, when it comes to the ACC, a lot of these games are really hard to predict because we've seen North Carolina now in the last couple of years. After starting out really well, they really choke the rest of the way. So I think North Carolina does go 8-4 here for 2024. So let me guys know what you think about this North Carolina team down in the comments below. What do you think their record will be for 2024? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.